Hi everybody, welcome to Geophiles in the Field, and today we're going to talk about this outcrop. It's one of my favorite outcrops of the Pangea orogeny. This was a mountain building event. This little outcrop has some cool stuff to it.
Hey everybody, the wind was way too brisk and the traffic was way too heavy while I recorded this video, so I'm doing a voiceover. It's not going to match perfectly, but the information is still there. I could not edit it out. But anyway, this is one of those good outcrops to see cross-cutting relationships and to see how one rock intrudes another. At this outcrop, we basically have the host rock, which is the Quinnesec formation. It's multiple lithologies, but anyway, it serves as the host rock for the Spikehorn granite that intrudes it, the granite being the felsic plutonic lighter colored rock here. Now the Spikehorn does exist as a large pluton in the area, but here it exists as dikes. I need to give you a little bit of background here. These rocks were deposited during the Pangea orogeny. The Pangea orogeny was a continental collision that occurred, well, the magmatic part of it, from about 1880 to 1835 million years ago, so about a 45 million year span. Now, it would actually last until about 1770 million years ago with the deposition of the Barriga group, which is continental margin deposits to the north. But the magma part here is about 1880 to 1835 million years ago. Now, the Spikehorn has actually been dated, and it's about 1836 plus or minus 6 million years. Now, the thing with all these granites and stuff is this exists on a structure called the Dunbar Dome. The Dunbar Dome formed from a kind of odd continental collision. Here, when the continents came together, you basically had the Superior Craton, which exists to the north and forms the Upper Peninsula, and I'm in the gray area between that and the Marshfield terrain to the south, which slowly collided with the Superior Craton, creating this Pembine-Wassaw terrain, which would have been the island arc, which is what we're standing on here. And this occurred during the Pangea orogeny. But as this island arc formed of the Pembine-Wassaw terrain, this specific structure called the Dunbar Dome was in the middle of it all, and that's where this outcrop sits. That's what it stands upon. So here we are on the Dunbar Dome. We are standing on the host rock of the Quinnesec, and we are observing the Spikehorn granite existing as dikes within it. Quinnesec is, like I said, is multiple lithologies, mostly surface flows. Basaltic, right, they're metamorphosed, but their parent rocks are mostly things like basalts and other mafic lavas, stuff like that. So these formed initially. They are the oldest part of this Pangea orogeny. The Spikehorn came much later. And in this outcrop, we can see sharp contacts between the Spikehorn granite and the Quinnesec. Now, the Quinnesec doesn't seem to be serving as the kind of country rock that this rock absorbed. I have studied this and measured this outcrop in detail, and it appears in my roadside book of the area. And the Spikehorn locally right here, although it does exist in Pluton elsewhere, exists as dikes that seem to follow fractures that existed within the Quinnesec, because at this time the Quinnesec would have been deeply buried and already undergoing lithification and metamorphism at the time. So the Spikehorn here intrudes it as dikes and odd little blobs, and the magma that the Spikehorn came from doesn't seem to have incorporated much of the Quinnesec. It doesn't have a lot of mafics in it, but we know it did intrude the Quinnesec because we have xenoliths within the Spikehorn, and this is a nice, awesome angular xenolith here that formed as the Spikehorn came through these fractures. It grabbed a chunk of this, did not incorporate it into the magma, but instead just carried it along with it, and then the magma solidified into the granitic rocks we see here. And we can tell by measuring, because it's hard to look at and see here, but when you measure these dikes, you find out they are sheet dikes, that they kind of follow two distinct trends within the Quinnesec here, which makes me think they're fracture. They were injected into fractures during magmatic activity when the rest of the Spikehorn wasn't placed. The contact between the Quinnesec and the Spikehorn is very sharp, and it's not baked. So the magma that formed it, the Spikehorn granitic rocks here, and they are true granites. We've done enough petrographic analysis to come to the conclusion that the vast majority of the samples taken from the Spikehorn are true granites. There are some that are outside of that, but the vast majority are true granites. But this magma would have came in viscous and not that hot, but it would have taken a lot of time to cool. And the lack of a bake zone and the fact that it's still granitic and didn't cool quickly and form a finer grain like rhyolite dikes system or something like that shows us that the Quinnesec was already deeply buried and undergoing some sort of heat and pressure, some sort of metamorphism that kept the Quinnesec hot and allowed this magma to intrude in as sheet dikes and give it enough time to cool slowly to form a more phaneritic instead of aphanitic rock. Now, as the Pembine-Wausau terrain island arc became sandwiched in between the Superior Craton and the Marshfield terrain, and this ocean basin closed, this would have formed mountains. The Pembine-Wausau terrain would have had huge mountains standing kilometers upon kilometers or miles upon miles above our heads that has all subsequently been eroded, exposing the core of this ancient mountain range, giving us a good cross-section of how these things form and how pre-Cambrian plate tectonics evolved. Because this outcrop is Precambrian, Paleoproterozoic in age. There are modern island arc terrains being accreted to cratons or continents at present. The Japanese islands are a perfect example of one such island arc merging with a continent. I think that's it for a good basic lecture of what is going on here. But anyway, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below, and I hope you learned something.